You know, there are moments in life that completely flip your world upside down. For me, it was about 3 weeks ago when I first started to suspect something was off with my wife, Emily. It was one of those ordinary afternoons, nothing particularly special. I was at work, taking a quick break, and decided to call her. We needed to talk about the kids. My son just got accepted to college, and we had to figure out how to handle the next steps. Emily's been working at a marketing firm, so I figured she'd be swamped, but a quick chat wouldn't hurt. I dialed her work number, expecting the usual. But when she picked up, she was more flustered than I had ever heard her. "Hey, babe, I'm super busy right now. We're in the middle of a meeting. I'll have to call you back, okay?" Weird, I thought. Meetings weren't unusual, but her tone was off. She wasn't just busy. She sounded like she didn't want me calling at all. But here's where things started getting fishy. See, one of my old college buddies, Rachel, works in the same office as Emily. Now, my wife didn't know Rachel, and I went way back to our university days. We lost touch for a while after Rachel took a break from school, but we reconnected later. I figured, what the heck? And texted Rachel to see if she was also in this supposed meeting. Maybe they were all in some big company powwow. Rachel didn't hesitate. "Oh, Emily?" She and James, her boss, left about 40 minutes ago. They signed out for the day. "Sorry, I don't know where they went." My heart skipped a beat. What? Emily told me she was stuck in a meeting. My gut twisted. I knew something was wrong. I quickly pulled up this family locator app on my phone, one I had installed years ago when the kids were younger. Even though I hadn't used it in forever, it was still there. To my surprise, the app showed that Emily wasn't at work. She wasn't anywhere near it. No, she was in the middle of the city, at a fancy restaurant that was only a few blocks from my office. My mind started racing. Could this be just an innocent lunch? I wasn't about to sit around and wonder. I grabbed my car keys and flew out of the office, heading straight to that restaurant. Parking my car across the street, I spotted her, Emily, coming out of the restaurant with James. But it was what happened next that set my blood boiling. He casually took her hand, like it was nothing, like they were a couple. And then they started walking toward a sleazy-looking motel just across the road. I snapped. My heart pounded as I circled around the block, cutting through a side alley, determined to confront them. When they were only a few feet from the motel, I stepped out from behind some bushes and, without missing a beat, I called out, "Emily, fancy seeing you here. We need to talk." I could feel the tension explode between the three of us. Emily's eyes went wide, like a deer caught in the headlights. James looked like he'd rather be anywhere but there. "What are you doing here?" she stammered. Her face flushed. This was the same woman who just an hour earlier told me she was too busy with work for even a quick chat. Ignoring the lies, I played it cool. "Well, since we're all here, why don't we grab a bite to eat together? You know, like a proper lunch?" My voice was steady, but I felt the anger bubbling underneath the surface. Emily squirmed. No. Actually, we were just heading back to the office," she said, grasping at straws, trying to pull herself out of this mess. James, meanwhile, just stood there, stone-faced, his hand awkwardly letting go of hers. "Perfect, I'll drive you back," I said, smiling like I didn't just catch them sneaking off together. You could see the panic in Emily's eyes, but there wasn't much she could do. So, the three of us climbed into my car. It was the most awkward drive of my life, no one daring to say a word. When we finally reached their office, I gave Emily a long, hard look before saying, "I'll pick you up after work." Later that evening, after the dust had settled a bit, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was really wrong. I reached out to Rachel again and asked her to keep an eye on things, just in case. She agreed, and though Emily and James seemed to keep their distance for a while, the damage was already done. Then, just when I thought things might calm down, Emily dropped another bombshell. She told me she was planning to go to an office party, one of those after-hours events where the single, carefree employees let loose. And guess what? She wasn't planning on taking me. That's when I knew. I was done playing the detective. I was done trying to make sense of her excuses and lies. Something inside me snapped that day. Our kids had grown up. The love between us had faded. She clearly didn't care about me anymore, and you know what? I wasn't about to sit around like some heartbroken fool while she played me. I wasn't too old to start over. Hell, there were a few women at my own office who had been giving me second looks lately. Maybe it was time I moved on too. I started digging deeper into James's life, and what I found only made me angrier. He was married with kids too. Worse yet, he depended entirely on his wife's connections to get his cushy job as head of their department. I got my hands on his wife's number. Oh, I was ready to drop this bombshell right into their lap. All I needed was the right moment. The tension in the air was thicker than ever after I confronted Emily and James that day. I was just biding my time, waiting for her next move. And she did not disappoint. One evening, not long after our uncomfortable car ride, Emily casually announced her plans for the coming Friday. She was going to a work event, she said, with all the other women from the office. And no, she did not want me to come along. Apparently, spouses weren't welcome. Oh, so it's a party for single ladies now? I asked, keeping my voice as calm as I could. My mind was already racing, putting pieces of this puzzle together. Emily rolled her eyes like I was being ridiculous. It's just an office thing, Brad. Why are you being so paranoid? I stared at her. Right. And will James be at this party too? Or is it just a girls' night out? That made her pause. I told you, it's just some work people. Stop making this a big deal. You don't trust me? I nearly laughed out loud. Trust? That ship had sailed the moment I caught her and James sneaking off toward that motel. But I kept my cool, smiling through my frustration. All right, have fun, I said. But don't expect me to just sit here and twiddle my thumbs while you run off with your work friends. She scowled at me, but I could tell I had hit a nerve. Good. The following days dragged by, the tension between us growing worse with every hour. Emily was doing her best to act normal, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. It was like a bad poker face. She was terrible at hiding what she was really feeling. Meanwhile, I had my own plan in motion. You see, I had already reached out to James's wife, Monica. When I first called her, I could sense her surprise, maybe even suspicion, but when I told her who I was and why I was calling, she went deadly quiet. I think we need to talk, I said calmly, laying out what I had seen. It's about your husband and my wife. There was a long pause. I could almost hear her trying to process what I was saying. You're serious? She finally asked. Her voice was tight with shock, maybe even anger. James would never. Oh, trust me, I said, cutting her off. I didn't want to believe it either. But I caught them, red-handed, leaving a restaurant together and walking hand in hand straight toward a motel. And I am telling you this because I don't want to be the fool. I don't know what you want to do with this information, but I thought you should know. Monica was silent for a long time, and when she spoke again, her voice had changed. The shock was gone, replaced by a cold determination. Thank you for telling me, she said. I'll handle this. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and anger. I knew Monica would confront James. The pieces were all falling into place, and I could already imagine the fallout. Emily had no idea what was coming her way. As Friday crept closer, Emily grew more distant. She was clearly looking forward to this party, probably imagining it was going to be a chance for her and James to get away from it all, away from me and Monica. But I had a feeling she was in for a rude awakening. That morning, Emily was in a rush. She darted around the house, gathering her things for work, and as she left, I noticed she had forgotten something. Her dress for the party. A small smile crept across my face. This was going to be interesting. After she left, I went into the bedroom and found the dress hanging neatly on the chair, along with her shoes. She was so flustered she had left them behind. Perfect. I decided to let her sweat it out a bit. When she called me later, panicked about leaving her outfit, I played it cool. Hey, yeah, I'm just at home today. You need me to bring it by your office? Oh God, yes, please. I left it on the chair. Can you drop it off? She asked, her voice laced with urgency. No can do, I replied. I'm not heading out today. Maybe you should skip the party altogether. I could almost hear her gritting her teeth through the phone. Brad, seriously? Just send it over with someone, please? I shrugged, knowing she couldn't see me but enjoying the control I had in this moment. Fine. I'll send it with Annie, I said, mentioning one of her younger colleagues. But don't expect me to be happy about it. She sighed in relief. Thank you, she said, Before hanging up, "Now, here's where things get interesting. When Annie came to pick up the dress, I was waiting for her outside. Hey, thanks for doing this," I said with a grin, handing her the dress and shoes. Then I casually dropped the bombshell. "By the way, tell Emily I've changed the locks. Her keys won't work anymore." Annie froze, her eyes wide. "What? Are you serious?" "Oh, dead serious," I replied. "Tell her I've also packed her things. I'll be sending them to her sister's place." She stared at me for a moment, clearly uncomfortable, but nodded before taking the dress and shoes and rushing back to her car. As I watched her drive away, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Emily was in for the shock of her life. I was done playing the fool. Later that afternoon, I started packing up Emily's things. Her clothes, her personal items, everything went into suitcases. By the time I was finished, there were 3 suitcases neatly lined up by the front door. I had arranged for a truck to deliver her stuff to her sister's house. I wanted her out of my life for good, but I wasn't done yet. I still had one more card to play. I called Monica. "It's happening today," I told her. "I've packed Emily's stuff, and she'll know what's coming when she gets the message. You should be getting a delivery soon, too." Monica didn't miss a beat. "Good. I've already made my move. What did you do?" I asked, intrigued. "I left him, told him it's over, and that his things will be on the curb when he gets home." I could not help but feel a sense of camaraderie. We were both done being played. And now, it was time to see how Emily and James would handle the fallout. When Friday evening finally rolled around, I could feel the tension in the air. Emily had no idea what was waiting for her when she got home, but I did. I had planned it perfectly. After Annie dropped off the dress, I knew Emily would assume everything was still under control. She probably thought she had won the day, that I was still in the dark, just letting her slip away to her little party. I almost laughed out loud at the thought. It was around 6 p.m. when Emily finally came home. Well, tried to come home. The first clue that her night was about to go very wrong was when she struggled to open the door with her old keys. After a few seconds of fumbling, she knocked. I opened the door slowly, savoring the moment. The look on her face was priceless, confusion mixed with panic. She was dressed up, ready to party, but she was not going anywhere now. "Brad," she stammered, clearly taken off guard. "What's going on? Why isn't my key working?" I gave her the coldest smile I could manage. "I told you, Emily. I changed the locks." Her eyes darted down to the suitcases that I had stacked neatly by the door. That was when she realized this was not a joke. "What is this?" she demanded, her voice starting to crack. "This is me being done with all your lies," I said calmly. "Your things are packed. You're leaving." She blinked, not fully processing it. "You're kicking me out? For what? For wanting to go to a party with my coworkers? Are you serious right now?" "Don't act like I do not know what's been going on," I said, my voice low but firm. "You've been sneaking around with James for weeks, maybe months. I caught you once already, remember? You think I'm an idiot?" Her face flushed bright red, not with embarrassment, but with anger. "James is just my boss. There's nothing going on. You're being ridiculous." "Really?" I shot back, feeling the anger I had kept bottled up for so long bubbling to the surface. "Then why did I catch you two holding hands, walking toward a motel in the middle of the day? Don't tell me that was just a business meeting." Emily opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. She knew she had been caught. There was no talking her way out of this one. "Your excuses do not work anymore," I continued, not giving her a chance to respond. "I've already spoken to Monica. She knows everything. I know everything." That stopped her dead in her tracks. "Monica? What do you mean you spoke to Monica?" I folded my arms, watching her squirm. "I told her the truth, Emily, that her husband and my wife have been sneaking around behind our backs. She's done with James, just like I'm done with you." For a second, she looked like she might cry, but then something inside her snapped. Instead of tears, I saw pure rage flash across her face. "You ruined everything," she spat. "Do you even know what you've done? You've wrecked my life, Brad." I laughed bitterly. "I wrecked your life? You did that all by yourself when you decided to cheat on me. This is on you." She stood there for a moment, stunned and fuming, before grabbing her suitcases with a huff. Fine, I'll go. But don't think for a second that I won't fight for what's mine. Good luck with that, I said, stepping aside to let her pass. But don't forget whose name is on the deed to this house. Spoiler alert, it's not yours. Emily shot me one last venomous look before storming out of the house, dragging her suitcases behind her. I watched her struggle to fit them into her car before slamming the door shut and speeding off down the street. The house felt eerily quiet after she left, but I did not mind the silence. It was a welcome change from the constant tension that had been hanging in the air for the past few weeks. I sat down on the couch, letting out a long breath. It was done. I had finally taken control of my life again. But the evening was not over just yet. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Monica. James just got his things. He's gone. I don't know where he's staying, but it sure as hell is not here. I smirked at the screen. We had both won, in our own way. I texted back, good. Emily's out too. Hopefully, this is the last we hear from them. Of course, I knew that was not the case. Things like this never end cleanly. But for now, I was savoring the small victory. I had no idea where Emily was going, and frankly, I did not care. She was out of my life, and that was all that mattered. The next morning, I got up early, feeling strangely light. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat down to enjoy the quiet. It felt good. No lies, no sneaking around, just peace. Around mid-morning, I started gathering up the rest of Emily's things. I wanted them gone, out of the house and out of my sight. As I was packing up the last of her clothes, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find my daughter, Sophie, standing there, looking worried. "Dad," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "What's going on?" "I just talked to Mom, and she said you kicked her out. What the hell is happening?" I had been expecting this conversation, but it did not make it any easier. "Come in," I said, gesturing for her to sit down. "We need to talk." Sophie sat on the couch, folding her arms across her chest, waiting for me to explain. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Look, Sophie, I didn't want it to come to this, but your mother's been lying to me. To all of us." She raised an eyebrow, clearly not convinced. "Lying? About what?" I took a deep breath. "About James. They've been seeing each other behind my back." Sophie's mouth dropped open. "Are you serious? Mom's having an affair?" She won't admit it, but I caught them together. And not just once. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, but after last night, I'm done. She's been lying to me for weeks. For a moment, Sophie just sat there, stunned. Then, she buried her face in her hands. "I can't believe this," she muttered. "I knew things were bad between you two, but this is insane." "I know," I said softly, sitting down next to her. "I'm sorry you had to find out like this." She was quiet for a long time, her face hidden in her hands. Finally, she looked up at me, her eyes red. "What happens now?" "I'm filing for divorce," I said simply. "There's no going back from this." Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes. "I guess I knew this was coming. I never thought it would actually happen." "Neither did I admitted. "But we'll get through it. I promise." The conversation with Sophie was heavy, but necessary. I could see the hurt in her eyes. As much as I wanted to shield her from everything, there was no way to soften the truth. She had to know what was going on. After she left, I spent the rest of the day in a fog, processing everything. Emily was gone, and there was no going back. The house, quiet and still, almost felt like a different place without her. But strangely, I did not miss her. Instead, I felt a growing sense of relief. That evening, as I was flipping through the TV channels, trying to distract myself from the whirlwind of emotions, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Monica. My heart skipped a beat. Had something else happened? I answered quickly. "Hey, Monica, what's going on?" Her voice was calm but firm, like she had made peace with something. "Brad, I just thought you should know. I saw James today." I sat up straighter, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. "Oh, yeah," she said with a sigh. "He tried to come back. Wanted to explain everything, of course." He's been staying at some dumpy motel, and apparently, he thought I'd let him back in. And did you? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Monica laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Hell no. I told him to take his sorry ass back to the motel. I'm done, Brad. There's no fixing this. I wanted you to know because, well, I think Emily might try the same with you. I sat there, taking it all in. Monica was right. Emily would not just disappear quietly. She was too stubborn for that. She'd try to come back, beg for forgiveness, or maybe even try to spin some story to make herself the victim. It was just a matter of time before she made her move. Thanks for the heads up, I said. I've already changed the locks, packed her stuff. If she comes knocking, she won't get far. Good, Monica replied. Stay strong, Brad. Don't let her manipulate you. I won't, I promised, and we hung up. The next few days passed by uneventfully. Emily had not made any attempts to contact me, and I started to wonder if maybe she had decided to just stay with her sister and leave me alone. That would have been too easy, though. I should have known better. Sure enough, one afternoon while I was at work, I got a text from Emily. It was short but to the point. We need to talk. Meet me tonight. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. My first instinct was to ignore her, but I knew this confrontation was inevitable. If I did not meet her now, she would just keep pushing, and I was done being pushed around. So I texted back, fine. I'll meet you at the cafe on Main at 7 o'clock. The day dragged on, my mind racing with everything I wanted to say. By the time 7 o'clock rolled around, I was ready. I pulled into the parking lot of the cafe and saw Emily's car already there. She was waiting, just as I knew she would be. I took a deep breath, steeled myself for the confrontation, and walked inside. Emily was sitting at a booth near the back, looking tired and stressed, but still trying to maintain some semblance of control. Her eyes lit up when she saw me, and she waved me over with that same, almost innocent smile that used to melt my heart. Not anymore. I slid into the seat across from her, folding my arms across my chest. All right, Emily, what do you want? She fidgeted with the napkin in her lap before finally meeting my gaze. Brad, listen. I know things have been bad between us, but this doesn't have to end like this. I raised an eyebrow. Like what, exactly? You cheating on me? You lying to my face for weeks? Yeah, I think it does have to end like this. Brad, please, she whispered, her voice cracking. It wasn't like that. I mean, yes, I admit I made mistakes, but nothing really happened with James. I never, she cut herself off, shaking her head as if she was trying to hold back tears. I never meant to hurt you. I had to fight the urge to roll my eyes. This was the same old song and dance. Don't lie, Emily. You think I'm stupid? I caught you two together. And even if you didn't go all the way, the intention was clear. You were planning to. She dropped her head, staring at her hands as if they held some kind of answer. I was confused, Brad. Things between us haven't been the same for a long time, and I guess You guess what? I cut in, my patience wearing thin. You guessed that sleeping with your boss would fix things between us? Her head snapped up, eyes wide. I didn't sleep with him. But you wanted to, I said, my voice sharp. And that's enough for me. Emily opened her mouth to argue, but then she stopped. For a moment, I thought she was finally going to admit the truth, to come clean about everything. But instead, she just sighed. I never wanted things to end this way. I leaned back in the booth, crossing my arms. Neither did I. But this is where we are. Silence hung between us for a long time. The noise of the cafe around us faded into the background as we sat there, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Emily spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you really want a divorce? Yes, I said firmly, without hesitation. There's no fixing this, Emily. I can't trust you anymore. And without trust, there's nothing left. She closed her eyes for a moment, like she was trying to will herself to stay calm. When she opened them again, they were filled with a mixture of anger and sadness. So that's it? After everything we've been through, you're just going to throw it all away? I shook my head. I'm not throwing anything away. You did that when you started sneaking around with James. This is on you, Emily. Not me. Her face twisted with emotion, anger, guilt, desperation. "I can't believe this," she muttered. "I thought we could work through this, but clearly, you've already made up your mind." "I have," I said quietly. "I'm done." The words seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She flinched, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. For a moment, I thought she might break down completely, but she held herself together. "Fine," she finally said, her voice cold. "If that's what you want, then I guess there's nothing more to say." She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse and walking out of the cafe without another word. I watched her go, a strange mixture of sadness and relief washing over me. It was done. The marriage was over. There would be no more lies, no more betrayals. I paid for the coffee, stood up, and walked out into the cool evening air. For the first time in months, I felt free. As I drove home after that final conversation with Emily, I felt like I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The weight of the past few months, the lies, the betrayal, it all seemed to crash down on me at once. But mixed in with the sadness and anger was something else, a strange, almost unfamiliar sense of freedom. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was finally in control of my own life again. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. No Emily, no tension hanging in the air, just peace. I sat down on the couch, staring out the window, trying to process everything. I had done it. I had finally made the decision to walk away from the mess, to start fresh. And yet, as much as I knew it was the right choice, it still hurt. Years of marriage, countless memories, and shared experiences, gone, just like that. My thoughts were interrupted by the buzzing of my phone. It was a text from Sophie. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked. I sighed. Of course, she was worried. I quickly typed out a response. "I'm fine. Just talk to your mom. It's over, sophomore. We're getting divorced." Her reply came almost immediately. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I hate that it's come to this. Are you sure this is what you want?" I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed back, "Yes, I'm sure. It's for the best." I knew she was hurting too. The idea of her parents splitting up, of our family breaking apart, was hard for her to accept. But I also knew that dragging this out, pretending everything was fine when it clearly was not, would hurt her more in the long run. The next few days passed in a blur. I filed the divorce papers, made arrangements with my lawyer, and tried to focus on work. But the house felt emptier than ever, and every time I walked by Emily's old things, I felt a stab of pain. Despite everything, a part of me still couldn't believe it was really over. But I knew I had to keep moving forward. One afternoon, as I was packing up more of Emily's belongings to send over to her sister's place, my phone rang. It was Sophie again. "Dad, can we talk?" "Of course," I said, sitting down on the edge of the bed. "What's up?" "I've been thinking," she said hesitantly, "about everything. About Mom, about the divorce. It's hard for me to understand how things got this bad." I rubbed my temples, trying to find the right words. "I know it's hard, sophomore, trust me. I never wanted this to happen. But your mom made some choices that I just can't forgive. And I can't live in a marriage where there's no trust." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" I thought about that for a long time before answering. Maybe, but forgiveness doesn't mean staying together. Some things, once they're broken, can't be fixed. She sighed. "I just wish things were different." "Me too, kiddo," I said softly, "but we'll get through this. We always do." After we hung up, I sat there for a while, staring at the divorce papers on the table. It felt surreal. This was not how I had pictured my life, not how I had imagined my marriage would end, but it was the reality I had to face. Later that evening, as I sat in the kitchen with a glass of whiskey, my mind wandered back to Emily. I wondered what she was doing, where she was staying. Was she with James? Or was she alone, regretting the choices she had made? Part of me wanted to reach out to her, to talk, to find some kind of closure. But the stronger part of me knew better. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. Just as I was about to turn in for the night, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email. From Monica. Subject, an update on James. Curiosity piqued. I opened the email. It was short, But the message was clear. Brad, just wanted to let you know that James is out of the picture. I had him served with divorce papers yesterday. He's staying in some cheap motel, and I haven't heard from him since. I figured you'd want to know. Hope you're doing okay. Take care, Monica. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, processing her words. So, it was not just Emily and me going through this mess. Monica had finally pulled the trigger on her own divorce, cutting ties with James once and for all. It felt oddly satisfying, knowing that we were both taking steps to move on from the chaos they had caused. I typed a quick reply, "Thanks for the update, Monica. Glad to hear you're taking control of the situation. Let's hope this is the last we hear from them." Her response came almost immediately, "Amen to that." The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. There was still a long road ahead, but I could finally see a glimmer of hope on the horizon. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was ready to face it. Just as I was finishing up my coffee, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Sophie standing there, holding a box of donuts and a hopeful smile on her face. "Figured we could have breakfast together," she said, stepping inside. "Maybe talk some more." I smiled, gesturing for her to come in. "That sounds perfect." As we sat down at the kitchen table, I realized that while my marriage with Emily was over, my relationship with my daughter was stronger than ever, and that, at least, was something I could hold on to. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind of change, but also a strange calm. With Emily out of the picture, I was slowly settling into my new life, one where the constant worry and suspicion had finally lifted. Sophie came over more often, and we really talked, about what had been going on, not just with me, but with her too. She was navigating her own life, figuring out what all of this meant for her as an adult. It was tough for her to see her parents split after all these years, but I could tell she understood why it had to happen. But just when I thought things were starting to stabilize, there was another surprise waiting for me, one I did not see coming. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was at work, knee-deep in a project. I had been trying to distract myself with work lately, diving into every task I could to keep my mind off everything. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced down, and my heart stopped for a second. It was a text from Emily. "I need to see you. Please. It's important." I stared at the message for a long moment, my mind racing. What now? We had already had our final conversation. I had made it clear that I wanted a divorce. What could possibly be so important? I hesitated for a moment, then sighed and typed back, "Fine. Where and when?" Her response was quick. "Tonight. Our usual place, 7 o'clock. Our usual place was the cafe where we had shared so many quiet breakfasts together before everything went south. It felt like a distant memory now, but I agreed. Whatever she had to say, it was better to face it head-on than to keep wondering. The hours ticked by slowly until it was time to meet her. I arrived at the cafe just before 7 o'clock, half expecting her to already be there, but when I walked in, she was nowhere to be seen. I sat down in one of the back booths, waiting. Emily showed up about 15 minutes late, looking flustered and tense. As soon as she slid into the booth across from me, I could tell something was different. Her face was pale, and she looked like she had barely slept in days. Whatever this was, it was not just another attempt to beg for forgiveness. Something was really wrong. "I'm sorry for being late," she mumbled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. It's been a lot." "What's going on, Emily?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. I was tired of the games, and I just wanted her to get to the point. She took a deep breath, her hands shaking slightly as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "I'm pregnant, Brad." I froze. Of all the things I had expected her to say, this was not even on my radar. Pregnant? How? My mind raced, trying to piece together what this meant, but one question stood out above all the others. "Is it mine?" I asked quietly, unsure if I even wanted to know the answer. Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head slowly. "No, it's not. It's James's." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind right out of me. I sat there, stunned, unable to process what she had just told me. James? She was pregnant with his baby? I had already known about the affair, but this? This was something else entirely. This was the final nail in the coffin, the absolute confirmation that our marriage was beyond saving. I thought you said you never slept with him, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I know, she sobbed, wiping at her eyes. I lied. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. It just happened. I closed my eyes, trying to gather my thoughts, trying to make sense of the situation. My emotions were all over the place. Anger, sadness, disbelief. But mostly, I just felt numb. So, why are you telling me this now? I asked after a long pause. What do you expect me to do with this information? She looked up at me, her eyes desperate. I don't know, Brad. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. I thought maybe, I don't know, maybe we could talk about it. I stared at her in disbelief. Talk about what? You're pregnant with another man's child. What's there to talk about, Emily? We're getting divorced. This just proves it even more. She flinched at my words, like they physically hurt her. I know, she whispered. I didn't know who else to turn to. I haven't told James yet. I let out a bitter laugh. Oh, I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear the news. Emily didn't respond, just sat there staring down at her hands, clearly unsure of what to say next. I was done, though. Done with her lies. Done with the drama. Done with being dragged into her mess. I don't know what you want from me, Emily, I said finally, my voice cold. But this changes nothing. We're done. I don't care what you do from here. You need to tell James. Deal with this on your own. I'm not a part of this anymore. She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, clearly hoping for some kind of comfort, but I had none left to give. Not to her. Not after everything that had happened. Brad, please, she started, but I cut her off. No, Emily. You've made your choices. Now you have to live with them. I stood up, leaving a few bills on the table to cover the coffee, and walked out of the cafe without another word. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt strangely calm, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. This was the final chapter in our story. There would be no more conversations, no more attempts at reconciliation. Emily had made her bed, and now she would have to lie in it. I climbed into my car and drove home in silence, letting the reality of the situation sink in. It was over. Truly over. There was no going back now. That night, as I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, I felt a sense of peace. For the first time in a long while, I knew that I had made the right decision. It would not be easy, but I would move on. I would rebuild my life, piece by piece. Emily was no longer my problem, and for that, I was grateful. The weight of Emily's bombshell lingered for days, but I found that it did not hit me as hard as I expected. Maybe I had been through too much already to feel the full impact of her latest revelation. Or maybe, deep down, I had already detached myself from her and everything she had become. Either way, I knew one thing for sure. I was done. Done with her lies, done with the drama, and done with holding on to a past that was never coming back. It was time to move forward. A few days after our conversation at the cafe, I got a call from my lawyer. The divorce papers had been filed, and the process was officially in motion. It felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The idea of finalizing the divorce, of cutting the last thread between Emily and me, was both terrifying and liberating. But it was necessary. That night, as I sat on my back porch with a beer in hand, I realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter for me. One without Emily. One where I could finally focus on myself, my kids, and my future without the shadow of her betrayal hanging over me. The next few weeks were a strange blur of normalcy and legal proceedings. I went to work, spent time with Sophie, and occasionally saw my other daughter, Maddie, who had been busy with her own life and career. They both checked in on me regularly, worried about how I was handling everything. But the truth was, I felt better than I had in a long time. Free, even. Emily, on the other hand, was slowly fading from my life. We communicated only through lawyers, and aside from the few times she tried to text me with more apologies, I kept my distance. I knew she was struggling with her pregnancy, but that was not my problem anymore. I had nothing left to give her, emotionally or otherwise. One afternoon, I got a surprise visitor. Sophie showed up at my house, but this time she wasn't alone. Maddie was with her, and they both had serious looks on their faces as they sat me down in the living room. "Dad," Sophie started, "we need to talk to you about Mom." I frowned, setting down the book I had been reading. "What about her?" Maddie sighed. "She's not doing well. I mean, emotionally. She's a wreck. I know she's messed up a lot, but we're worried about her." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "She made her bed, Maddie. I'm not sure what you want me to do about it." Sophie, ever the peacekeeper, tried to bridge the gap. "We know, Dad, but she's still our mom. And this whole thing with James and the baby, it's really taking a toll on her." The mention of the baby made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Look, I get that this is hard for you too. But Emily made her choices, and now she has to deal with the consequences. I'm not getting dragged back into this." Maddie shook her head. "We're not asking you to fix her problems, Dad. I don't know. We thought you should know how bad it's gotten." "Is she still living with Aunt Sarah?" I asked, though I hadn't really kept tabs on her since we stopped talking. Sophie nodded. "Yeah, but it's not good. Aunt Sarah's been trying to help, but Mom's a mess. She hasn't told James about the baby yet, and she's been going back and forth on what to do." That hit me harder than I expected. As much as I wanted to be done with Emily, hearing that she was spiraling still stirred something inside me. Maybe it was years of caring about her. Maybe it was just a natural instinct to want to fix things. But I knew better than to let that pull me back in. "She needs to tell James," I said bluntly. "That's her responsibility now, not mine." Maddie exchanged a look with Sophie before speaking. "We know. We've told her that too. But she's scared. She should have thought about that before." I muttered, the anger bubbling up again. Sophie leaned forward, her voice soft. "Dad, we're not asking you to get involved. We just want you to know what's going on. We're trying to help her, but we don't know how." I sighed, rubbing my hands over my face. "Look, I appreciate you two telling me this, but I can't fix her. Not anymore. She's made her choices, and I'm done cleaning up her messes. She's going to have to face this on her own." There was a heavy silence in the room as the weight of my words sank in. Sophie looked like she wanted to say more, but Maddie, ever the pragmatic one, nodded in understanding. "I get it," Maddie said quietly, "but if you ever change your mind, we'll be here." I nodded, grateful for their understanding. "I love you both, and I'm always here for you. But this, Emily and her mess, it's not my problem anymore." After they left, I sat on the couch, staring out the window, feeling conflicted. I knew I had made the right choice in stepping back from Emily's chaos, but that did not make it any easier. I cared about my daughters, and seeing them torn between their parents was hard. But I had to stand my ground. Getting dragged back into Emily's life would only hurt me more in the long run. A few weeks later, the divorce was finalized. It was not a dramatic courtroom scene like you see on TV. No, it was a quick and almost clinical process. Papers were signed, assets divided, and just like that, it was done. Emily and I were no longer husband and wife. The finality of it hit me that evening as I sat on my porch, watching the sun set. This chapter of my life was officially over. And while part of me felt a deep sense of loss, another part of me felt relieved. I was free to move on, free to build something new. I did not know what the future held, but I was ready to face it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again. I had no idea what was next, but that uncertainty no longer scared me. Emily's story, her choices, her lies, they were in the past. And now, I was looking toward the future, knowing that whatever came next, I would be okay. With the divorce officially behind me, life began to take on a new rhythm. It was strange, at first, living without the constant presence of Emily, the drama, the tension. But as the days turned into weeks, I realized just how much better things were without the weight of all those lies dragging me down. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects, and finding myself more focused than I had been in years. It was refreshing, to say the least, to be able to concentrate on something without worrying about what was happening behind my back. My colleagues noticed the change, too. I caught a few of them giving me curious looks, probably wondering what had caused the shift in my mood. But no one asked. I kept the details of my personal life to myself. It was better that way. Sophie and Maddie stayed close, checking in on me regularly. I was grateful for that. Despite everything that had happened, they managed to keep a balanced perspective. They never took sides, even though they were clearly disappointed in their mother's choices. But they also knew that I needed space from Emily and respected that. Emily, meanwhile, had gone completely quiet. After the divorce was finalized, I did not hear from her again. No phone calls, no texts. Part of me had expected her to try one last time to reach out, to apologize, or maybe even to ask for help with her pregnancy, but she stayed away. It was the best thing she could have done. Every time I thought about her, all I could feel was a strange mix of anger and pity. I had once loved her deeply, but that love had been buried under layers of betrayal and deceit. I had no desire to dig it up. One afternoon, I was sitting on the back porch, enjoying the unusually warm weather, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, expecting another work email or maybe a text from Sophie, but my heart skipped a beat when I saw the name. Monica. I hadn't heard from her since she had told me about divorcing James. For a moment, I hesitated, wondering if I even wanted to open the message. What could she possibly have to say now? But curiosity got the better of me, and I tapped on the notification. Hey Brad, just thought you'd want to know. I finally confronted James about everything. It wasn't pretty, but it's done. I'm moving on. I hope you're doing well. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime, talk about everything. I stared at the message for a long moment, unsure of how to respond. Coffee? With Monica? It felt strange, but at the same time, I understood why she had reached out. We had both been dragged through the mud by Emily and James's affair, both been blindsided by their betrayal. Maybe talking to someone who had gone through the same thing wouldn't be the worst idea. I typed back a quick reply. I'd like that. Let me know when you're free. Her response came almost immediately. How about this weekend? Saturday morning? I agreed, and we set a time and place. After I put my phone down, I found myself thinking about Monica. I had only spoken to her a few times, mostly brief conversations about the mess James and Emily had created. But there was something comforting about knowing she had been through the same storm. Maybe talking to her would bring some much-needed closure, or at least help me make sense of everything that had happened. When Saturday morning rolled around, I found myself feeling strangely nervous as I drove to the cafe. It was the same one where I had confronted Emily for the last time, which made the whole situation feel even more surreal. I parked the car, took a deep breath, and walked inside. Monica was already there, sitting at a small table by the window, sipping on a cup of coffee. She looked up when she saw me and gave a small, tentative smile. I returned the gesture, and as I approached the table, I realized just how tired she looked, like someone who had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders for far too long. Hey, she said softly as I sat down. Thanks for meeting me. No problem, I replied. How are you holding up? She let out a long sigh, setting her coffee cup down. Honestly, it's been tough. The divorce, everything with James. I didn't think it would be this hard, even though I knew it had to happen. I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. Yeah, it's not easy. Even when you know you're doing the right thing, it still hits you hard. Monica glanced out the window for a moment, her expression distant. James. He wasn't the man I thought he was. I don't know if I ever really knew him at all. I try to make sense of it, to figure out where things went wrong, but at some point, I just had to let it go. He's not my problem anymore. Her words echoed my own thoughts about Emily. That's exactly how I feel, I said. Emily made her choices, and I can't keep trying to figure out why she did what she did. It's a dead end. Monica nodded, her eyes meeting mine. We were both caught in the same storm, huh? Yeah, I said, smiling slightly, but we made it out. We sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, sipping our coffee. It was strange, talking to her like this. Two people who had been brought together by the betrayal of their spouses, trying to pick up the pieces and move forward. But it was also strangely comforting. As the conversation continued, we talked more about the fallout from the divorces, how our lives had changed, and what the future might hold. Monica was still figuring things out, just like I was, but there was a quiet strength in her that I admired. She was not wallowing in self-pity. She was determined to move on, and that determination was something I could relate to. After an hour or so, we wrapped up our conversation and said our goodbyes. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter. Talking to Monica had been the right choice. It had helped me see that I was not alone in this, that there was a way forward even after all the chaos. And, as strange as it sounded, I realized that I was starting to feel hopeful again. After meeting with Monica, something shifted inside me. It was as if the last bit of weight I had been carrying from the whole ordeal with Emily and James finally lifted. The more I reflected on it, the more I realized that I had been holding onto pieces of anger, sadness, and resentment without even knowing it. That conversation with Monica, someone who had walked through the same fire, allowed me to finally let it all go. In the following weeks, life continued to move forward, but this time with a lighter step. I started focusing on things I had neglected during the turmoil of my marriage's collapse. I reconnected with old friends, began taking better care of myself, and even considered taking a short vacation, something just for me. It felt like I was rediscovering the person I used to be before everything had fallen apart. Sophie and Maddie noticed the change too. They would drop by for dinners or call just to catch up, and they no longer had that worried look in their eyes. Instead, they were relieved to see me coming out on the other side of this stronger, more at peace. One night, after a quiet dinner with both of them, Sophie pulled me aside and smiled. "Dad, I've been meaning to tell you. I'm proud of you." I was caught off guard by her words. Proud? For what? For how you've handled all of this. For not letting it break you. She paused, glancing at Maddie, who was busy in the other room. "I know it wasn't easy, but you've shown me what it looks like to stand up for yourself. To move on. You deserve to be happy." Her words hit me harder than I expected. It was not often that a parent heard that kind of thing from their child, and it meant more to me than I could express. I hugged her, feeling a warmth I had not felt in a long time. "Thanks, kiddo," I said, my voice thick. "That means a lot." As the weeks passed, I began thinking about the future in a way I had not allowed myself to in a long time. What did I want my life to look like now that the dust had settled? For the first time in years, I had no more chaos to manage, no more lies to uncover. It was just me, my kids, and the wide-open possibility of what could come next. One day, out of the blue, I got another message from Monica. It had been a while since we had last talked, but her text came at just the right time. "Hey Brad, hope you're doing well. I've been thinking, you up for another coffee sometime? I'd love to catch up." I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a small smile tug at the corners of my mouth. There was something different about this invite, something that felt more relaxed, more hopeful. We had both been through the worst of it, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to start thinking about what came next. I typed back quickly, "Sounds great. How about Saturday?" Monica's reply came almost instantly. "Saturday it is. Looking forward to it." That Saturday, as I drove to the cafe, I felt more at ease than I had in a long time. This wasn't about rehashing the past or picking through old wounds. This was about new beginnings. When I arrived, Monica was already there, sitting by the window again. But this time she looked different, more relaxed, maybe even a little hopeful, just like me. "Hey," I said as I sat down, smiling. "Hey," she replied, her smile warm and genuine. We ordered our coffee and began talking. But this time the conversation felt lighter, more natural. We didn't dwell on the past too much. Instead, we talked about what we had both been up to since our last meeting. Our kids, our work, what we had been doing to move forward. It was easy, comfortable. There was no awkwardness, no heaviness, just two people figuring out what came next in their lives. At one point, Monica paused, looking down at her cup thoughtfully before glancing back up at me. "You know," she said softly, "I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again after everything. But sitting here with you, I feel okay. Like maybe there's a way to move on, after all." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Yeah, me too. I didn't think I'd be able to let go of all the anger and hurt, but here we are. It feels good, doesn't it?" She smiled, and for the first time since I had met her, it reached her eyes. "It really does." We spent the rest of the morning talking, laughing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe things were going to be okay. I had been so focused on surviving the storm, on putting one foot in front of the other, that I hadn't realized how far I had come. Now, sitting across from someone who had been through it all with me, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was moving forward. As we wrapped up our coffee and prepared to leave, Monica looked at me, her expression soft. You know, Brad, I think we both deserve a little happiness after everything. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Yeah, I think we do. We said our goodbyes, but this time it didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning. As I drove home, I found myself thinking about the future, not with dread or fear, but with a sense of possibility. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. And that, I realized, was the real victory. After all the heartache, the betrayal, the lies, I had come out the other side. I wasn't the same person I had been before, but maybe that was a good thing. I had learned a lot about myself, what I could endure, what I was capable of, and most importantly, what I deserved. Emily and James were part of my past, but they no longer defined my future. My future was mine to create, and I planned to make the most of it. As I pulled into my driveway and stepped out of the car, I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air on my skin. A new chapter was beginning, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready for whatever came next.